The Goddess, 1958. Original story and screenplay by Paddy Chayefksy. Produced by Milton Perlman. Directed by John Cromwell. For Sue. Fade in. Under the credits, a Greyhound bus, vintage 1930, rolls along on a highway. It is a bright summer day. This is tobacco and farm country. Long, flat fields, farmhouses. The following legend appears. Part 1. Portrait of a Girl. After this has faded, this legend. Beacon City, Maryland, 1930. The Goddess. Fade in on interior of the bus. Close to shot of a young mother aged 26 and her 4-year-old daughter. The mother is somber, staring out of the window. The little girl is sleeping in her seat. The bus is half filled with people whose faces are grim. Close-up of the mother looking expressionlessly out the window. Mother's POV. A desolate farm, a broken-down deserted barn, a rusted plow or barrow projecting forlornly out of a wild tobacco field. Mother's POV. A deserted loose floor or tobacco warehouse. Windows broken or boarded up. The large front door gaping open and hanging loose on broken hinges. We see a large, crude, hand-printed sign as we rumble by. It reads, "Closed for depression." Exterior, Main Street, dusk. The bus rumbles into the main street of a fair to middling-sized town. Medium shot. The bus as the mother and the little girl disembark. They stand a moment looking at the strange town. The bus pulls away. Mother's POV. A row of stores, boarded up or with broken windows. A feed shop with a large sign slashed across its window. No credit. Camera pans slowly. 4 or 5 gloomy men stand morosely, incommunicatively in front of the courthouse. 2 old 1930 and older trucks, 2 cars, dusty and beaten, stagger down the almost empty street. A greasy hamburger joint where 2 men lounge silently in front of it, watching to see who gets off the bus. The Hotel Montgomery, silent and grimy. A dry cleaning shop, and then a series of indistinguishable shops, gray and listless in the gathering dusk. The stores eventually trail off into small 2-story brick buildings and white clapboard houses. In short, the main street of a southern town of 10,000 population in 1930. The mother checks an address on a piece of paper that she has taken out of her purse, studies the numbers on the stores in front of her, and starts off down the street toward the private houses in the distance. The little girl tags after her. The uncle's home. A pleasant-looking woman in her early 30s wearing a house dress admires the little girl and beams at her. The little girl is the center of a circle consisting of the woman holding her who is her aunt, a smiling but harried-looking man in his late 30s who is her uncle, and her mother. When they begin talking, we will realize that all 3 are Southerners. The parlor is typically lower-middle-class Southern. It has a cluttered feeling, owing more to the sobriety of the furnishings than to an excess of bric-a-brac. There is a long table on which sits a series of family portraits, and a small fireplace over which sits a modest mantel. The end tables all have doilies, and there is a candy dish on each one. There is the inevitable overstuffed chair and the platform rocker, a heavy standing lamp with fringed shade, and a heavy table lamp with fringed shade. The somberness is hardly relieved by a calendar with a Protestant-type religious picture on it and 2 or 3 other pictures in the temper of Jesus in the garden. These are a number of magazines. There are a number of magazines and catalogs piled neatly on the mantel, mostly Good Housekeeping, Sears, Roebuck catalogs, and the Progressive Farmer. The aunt, bursting with enthusiasm at the little girl she holds. Oh, she's just adorable, the mother. Emily Ann, what do you say to your Aunt Alice when she says how pretty you are? The mother seems abruptly to have forsaken the stony melancholia that hung over her in the preceding scenes. She is all pretty Southern belle now, eyes flashing, gay almost to the point of lightheadedness, comfortable in the flurry of formalities of visiting and being welcomed. The uncle. She is the spitting image of you, Lorraine. The mother. I can't believe you never saw her before. Has it been that long? Wasn't you down in Mama's, George, when we was... No, you wasn't there. Betty Flo said you was sick. That's right. You was sick. Oh my, you have a lovely home here. I sold my house, George. It broke my heart, but the creditors were hovering around us like vultures. And the mortgages, I don't know how many there was. Papa came down and handled all the details. We got $4,000 for it from a man who lived in Knoxville. But all that was left when we paid Herbert's debts was $700. Well, wasn't that just like Herbert? Committing suicide and leaving me with so many debts. I don't have a house anymore. Oh, for heaven's sakes, George, don't look so alarmed. I haven't come up here to stay with you more than a 4 or 5 day visit. The uncle. Well, Lorraine, we fixed you up a nice room here, and you can stay as long as you want. He darts a quick look at his wife, who points out things through the window for the little girl. The aunt, from the window. Lorraine, I'm sure you would like something to eat or drink or something. The mother. Well, I've been riding 6 hours in that bus, and I'll tell you what I would like. I'd like a good drink of whiskey. That's what I would like. The uncle, going to the sideboard. Sure. The mother, sinking into a soft chair, exhausted. Mama's fine, George, and sends you her love. The aunt, carrying the little girl to the kitchen. I'm going to get this little girl some milk and cake. The mother. Well, she certainly takes to you, Alice Marie. She don't readily let people hold her like that. The aunt exits. The mother sends a quick, probing look over to her brother, who is pouring a drink for her at the sideboard. The mother. Well, she certainly does take to Alice Marie, George. It's a pity you all never had children. I know how much Alice Marie has wanted a child. They are a joy and a mainstay in times of distress. The night that Herbert shot himself in the head, I cried and cried. And then I went upstairs and I went into Emily Ann's room and I looked down at her sweet sleeping face. And I was able to face the terrible burdens that were ahead of me. The uncle, bringing the drink to her. We meant to come down to Herbert's funeral, but I had my jaundice, and the mother takes the drink and sips it a little nervously. I can't tell you what the 5 years of my marriage was like. Mama said I shouldn't have married him. I could have had any number of boys. You know that, George. I thought he was going to be such a successful man. Everybody said he was a live wire. He was going to have a chain of dry cleaning stores all through Tennessee. Oh, he was a big talker, he was. Well, he was a failure, and I told him so. He was common, and I married beneath me, and I got my proper due. Left alone with a 4-year-old child without even an N-word to help me, and $171 in the bank. What am I supposed to do now? She swallows the rest of her whiskey and hands the glass back for more. The uncle, pouring the second drink. I could let you have a little bit of money, but there's a depression on, And the mother stands, takes the second drink, and smiles. The brittle facade of the light-hearted Southern belle promptly restored to her face. The mother. Now, let's not talk about these things. My goodness, I haven't seen my own brother in 5 years, and this should be a joyous occasion. Uncle's house, guest room. Emily Ann now lies in a bed, but not asleep. Her eyes are wide open. The room is dark and hushed. The only light is a thin shaft coming sharply in from the second-story landing outside. A silhouette and then a second silhouette pass across the slightly open doorway, momentarily blocking out the light. The little girl's head turns to see what it was. Landing outside the bedroom. The uncle and the aunt are at the top of the stairs leading down to the first floor. The uncle has already started down the stairs but is being kept from going any farther by his wife's desire for a whispered conference. The uncle has the air of having gone through this particular conference 1,000 times. The uncle, heavy whisper containing his irritation. I don't know what she wants, Ellie. She says she don't want any money. She says she don't want to live with us. I don't know what she wants. They stand a moment at the head of the stairs, silent, frowning, anxious. And then the uncle starts down the stairs. A moment later, the aunt follows him. 3/4 of the way down the narrow staircase, there is a closed door which the uncle opens. The aunt. Might as well leave the door open, George. Let the heat up. They continue out of sight past the door. Camera pulls back so as to see the bedroom door open and the little girl cautiously pad barefoot onto the upper landing. She stands at the head of the dark, narrow stairs, trying to look down. She wears a cotton nightie. The parlor, night. The mother, wearing a flouncy Southern Belle-type dress, is at the mantel looking at a pile of magazines on a table. The uncle is seated warily, still glum in his soft chair. The aunt perches watchfully on the edge of the mohair davenport. Through chintz-curtained window, we see it is a dark night out. The mother. Don't you have no movie magazines, Alice Marie? Is all you got the Progressive Farmer? The aunt. I tucked your little girl in, and the mother, straightening. Well, she certainly takes to you, Alice Marie. She's absolutely crazy about you. I never did see her take to anybody like she takes to you. She moves restlessly around the room, noting the pictures of Jesus on the wall, the radio with its gaping speaker, the endless Georgian moldings on the wall, all the while the bright, toothy smile fixed on her face. The mother. Well, I must say that was a wonderful dinner. George, Alice Marie has made a wonderful home for you. The aunt. Oh, come on in the kitchen. What we sitting out here in the parlor for? The mother. I always envied girls who can cook because I am dreadful in the kitchen. I'm sort of gay and giddy, but that's my nature, smiling in the face of adversity. Can I turn the radio on? The question is rhetorical. She has already done so. The aunt. Go right ahead, Lorraine. The mother. I can't remember the last time I went dancing. I can't remember the last time I did anything. A razzmatazz orchestra suddenly bursts out from the radio, playing Exactly Like You, and the mother hurriedly bends to lower the volume. The mother. I do think I kept my figure, don't you think so, Alice Marie? The aunt. You don't look more than 19 years old, Lorraine. The mother dances a step or two of a foxtrot. She is nervous, restless, fidgety. The mother. If I have a fault, I'm a little vain. I was anxious about my figure after Emily Ann was born, but I assiduously did exercises every morning. And I think everything is where it should be. I still catch an eye when I walk down a street. There was a man in the seat in front of me in the bus coming over to here that liked to broke his neck trying to strike up an acquaintance. I do think I would like to get married again. What do you think a proper period of grace should be? About Herbert, I mean, before I seriously go out with a man. There is a man who I know is interested in me back in Clarksville. I don't know what else I can do except to get married. I can't stand being alone. Can I please turn off the radio? It's driving me crazy. She flicks the radio off. The uncle. Well, now, Lorraine, you just sit down and take it easy and don't be so excited. The mother shuts her eyes, sighs, and makes a visible effort to get a hold of herself. The aunt. Sit down, Lorraine. You've been living through a terrible ordeal. The mother, distraught. Mama said I could come live with them in Knoxville, but she and Papa are living in that little dirty two-room apartment right on Main Street, right over the five and dime store. I would think they would die of shame living there. I couldn't live there. And this man says he's been in love with me for years. He's a very attractive man. A little elderly, but attractive. I mean, 5 days after we had buried Herbert, he was asking me to marry him. I said I would think about it. He has a very nice home. He lives there all by himself with his sister, but he doesn't like children. She stares at her sister-in-law and then at her brother. He says he don't want no 4-year-old little girl hanging around his neck. Again, she stares at the two other people, wondering if they get the point. Then, taking the bit in her mouth, she says it. The mother. I was wondering, since she's absolutely crazy about you, Alice Marie, I never saw her take to anyone like she took to you this afternoon. So, I wonder if I could just leave her here just for a year or so, just till I manage matters better with this man. The aunt. Lorraine, she's your own little girl. The mother. You always said you wanted children, but the aunt. You can't just drop her on somebody's doorstep like that, Lorraine. The uncle. Lorraine. The mother fights back tears of fury and guilt, shame and confusion. The mother, crying out, I'm only 26 years old. I still got my figure. I want to have a little fun. I can't support her. I haven't got any money. The uncle. Maybe I could help you get a job. The mother, whirling on him. I don't want no job. I don't want no dirty job. The aunt. Lorraine, honey, she's your baby. The mother, whirling on the aunt, a tantrumy little girl herself. I don't want her. I don't want her. I was 17 hours in labor with her, and she's been trouble ever since. I didn't want her when she was born, and I don't want her now. The uncle, sharply. Lorraine. She turns away, dissolved in tears, her thin shoulders shaking. The uncle, airier for a moment. Well, how about his family? The mother. I can't go to them. The uncle didn't hear her. What? The mother. I can't go to them. The uncle. Well, it's his kid too, Lorraine. The mother now sits on the edge of the straight-backed chair, her head bowed, her eyes closed against her tears. The mother, in a low voice. I don't rightly think it is. She swallows beyond shame now. Well, we didn't get along almost from the beginning, and I had to do something. She stands in control of herself again, but unable to face the other two who are staring down at the floor. The mother. Well, I expect I'll have to go out and get a job or something. She moves out of the parlor into the entrance foyer, which contains the iron hall furnace and a settee. She suddenly looks up, conscious of being watched. Mother's POV. Looking up the dark, narrow stairway leading to the second floor. Just beyond the opened door, which is about steps up, we can make out little Emily Ann, half lighted by the upstairs landing light, hunched over, peering down into the entrance foyer. Close-up of Emily Ann. Her little face is expressionless, but she has heard just about everything. She turns and moves back up the stairs away from the camera. We watch her till she disappears at the head of the stairs. Fade out. Fade in. School playground, day. High angle shot looking down on a crowded playground of a public school on a bright June day. The place is filled with boys and girls of all ages up to 14, a few teachers and the sounds of high childish laughter. Emily Ann, now a pretty girl of 8, in a plain cotton dress, carries a thin textbook in a brown envelope. She wears high-ankle support shoes, and her hair is cut in the straight page boy style of those years. She comes out of one of the doors of the school into the playground. We can now distinguish some of the words the kids are shouting at each other and to their parents. Apparently, it is promotion day, and some of the kids are comparing report cards or showing them to their teachers. We hear the following ad-libs as camera slowly pans Emily Ann walking alone through the exuberance of the playground. I got promoted today. You got promoted? You get promoted? I got promoted today. You get promoted? I got Miss Coin next year. Who you got? We're in the same class. Hurrah. Hurrah. Hey, Thelma Sue, Sarah Ann, and I, we're in the same class next year. Emily Ann has made her way to the gate in the high wire fence leading to the street. Main Street. High angle shot looking down the length of Main Street. Somewhat more thriving than the last time we saw it. The signs of the Depression are gone, and the people seem more cheerful. Men in their shirt sleeves, women shopping, stores open. Way down at the far end of the street, we see the little form of Emily Ann walking toward us, carrying her textbook and her brown envelope. The 5 and dime shop, day. Emily Ann enters and looks around. The store consists of 5 counters running the length of the store. There is a 6th counter in the back. All of these counters are jammed with every conceivable form of notion, knick-knack and odds and ends. Each wall is piled to the ceiling with boxes and cartons. Dresses and coats hang from the ceiling, obscuring the overhead light fixtures. It is a jumbled, crowded store, yet there are only 1 or 2 customers. There are 3 sales ladies. 2 of them stand leaning against one of the counters, gassing about this and that. One of these sales ladies is Emily Ann's mother. She is 30 now, and hard lines have settled on her face. She uses too much rouge. Emily Ann comes up the aisle toward them. The sales lady calls the mother's attention to her daughter's presence. She turns to the girl with a frown of annoyance. The mother, annoyed. What do you want? What do you want, honey? The little girl regards her mother for a moment. Emily Ann. I got promoted today. The mother. That's fine. Now you go on home. Emily Ann proffering the envelope. Here's my report card. The mother. I'll look at it later. Now go on home. I told you not to come around here when I'm working. She turns back to her colleague and starts gassing away again. The little girl turns and goes back down the aisle to the open street door and out into the street. Residential street, day. Emily Ann stands in the driveway of a pretty, typically southern shingle house and calls to a friend who apparently lives here. Emily Ann, calling to the second floor. Sylvia. You home, Sylvia? No answer. Pause. Sylvia. I got promoted. I'm in Miss Cahill's class next year. She waits for some answer again. There is apparently nobody home. Mrs. Lyons, you home? Anybody home? Apparently not. She waits another moment, then turns and walks away. Street and slum section. Long shot across Emily Ann's thin back to an empty lot in which 4 or 5 black kids are playing. Camera pans a little bit around, just enough to see the wistful expression on Emily Ann's face as she watches them. Then she turns and walks a little farther down what seems to be a pretty ramshackle street, and turns in at one of the ramshackle houses. This is one of those 2-family houses in which the family on the second floor climbs an outside stairway to get to its apartment. Emily Ann gets to the top of the stairs, taking a key from the windowsill, opening the door and going into the apartment. In the background, we see clothes hanging on lines and other indications of the slum quality of the area. Emily Ann's home. Long shot, looking from the kitchen through the living room to the front door of the apartment as Emily Ann enters. It is a cheerless, inadequately furnished place. Bare walls, sparse furniture, several religious calendars on the wall. Dark, even on this bright June afternoon. A large old white icebox with the paint chipping off stands in the living room by the kitchen door. The reason it isn't in the kitchen is because the wood-burning stove lets off so much heat it would melt all the ice. The kitchen itself is dank and unappetizing. Worn, patchy linoleum covers the floor. There is a tall wall cupboard known as a safe, but which, when opened, reveals itself to be a thinly stocked pantry containing a few dishes and some cans and cereal containers. An old porcelain-topped kitchen table covered by an old oilcloth sits in the middle of the kitchen, flanked on 3 sides by 3 different chairs. 2 cane bottom chairs and a battered straight-back wooden relic of many another kitchen. There are dishes in the sink, empty milk bottles and empty beer bottles. The kitchen. Emily Ann comes into the kitchen. She places her book and report card on the table, goes to the icebox and opens it. Over her shoulder we see 2 bottles of milk, some bread, some butter, 9 bottles of beer, and that's all. She takes the milk and bread out, goes back to the wall pantry in the kitchen, reaches on her tiptoes and gets out a glass, pours herself a glass of milk. Then, taking a mouthful out of her slice of bread, she carries her glass of milk to the table and sits down. Long shot of a forlorn 8-year-old sitting all alone in a drab little kitchen, chewing a piece of bread and holding a glass of milk. Suddenly, a cat jumps into the room through the window. It is a tough, big, wild-looking alley cat. The girl sits up, startled, a little afraid. The cat prowls panther-like around the kitchen, its tail swishing, its eyes darting quick appraisals of the little girl who sits rigid in her chair watching it. Moment, a strangely calculating look comes over the little girl's face, and she carefully stands, wary not to frighten the cat, and moves back to the cupboard shelf where the bottle of milk still stands. The cat continues its restless patrolling of the room, on guard, muscles tensed. The little girl slowly pours some milk into a soup plate and carefully sets it on the floor, and then stands unmoving, rigid, watching. For a long moment, a thick silence fills the room, the cat moving around softly. Then, almost nonchalantly, it pads to the soup plate and dips its head in. For a moment, the little girl watches. Then, with a swoop, she seizes the cat and presses it against her face. Close up of Emily Ann, her face pressed against the torn, patchy skin of the alley cat, her eyes closed, hugging the startled, frenzied animal. Emily Ann to the cat. I got promoted today. The cat leaps out of the little girl's clutches and out of the window. Camera pulls back to a long shot so that we can see the sad little girl standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring off through the window through which the cat has just jumped. Main Street, 1942, day. Emily Ann, now 16, a pretty full-blown young girl, walks down Main Street. There is an air of wanton arrogance to her, as if she is well aware that the two men lounging in the door of the liquor shop are giving her a covertly approving eye. She wears a skirt and high heels. She holds 2 high school textbooks. Her hair is swept up to the top of her head in the fashion of the day. She is too young to carry all this. Camera pans with her until she turns in at the Five and Dime store. There are 3 high school boys around 17 wearing slacks and t-shirts or sports shirts out over their trousers, lounging at the Five and Dime entrance. They say hello to her as she sweeps past them. Then all 3 snicker. Across the 3 high school boys into the interior of the Five and Dime store. One of the boys watches her. The second boy seems to be giving the third boy intense instructions. The third boy, a stoutish young fellow, seems a little nervous. The Five and Dime store. Emily Ann walks toward the rear of the shop, the same store her mother worked in. She throws a greeting to a middle-aged sales lady as she heads to the back of the shop. Emily Ann. Good afternoon, Mrs. Kimbrough. Sales lady, without looking up. Good afternoon, honey. Emily Ann puts her textbooks on top of a carton in the back, turns and ambles back down the aisle. There are about 4 customers in the shop. The boss, a thin, middle-aged, not thoroughly shaven man, is selling 2 middle-aged women some men's socks. She gives her boss a greeting. Emily Ann. Hiya, Mr. Rice. Her boss nods. Emily Ann's attention is actually on the entrance of the shop where the 3 high school boys are still in whispered conference. Her POV. Looking down the aisle to the street door where 2 of the boys seem to be encouraging the short, stout boy to go in. They see Emily Ann watching them, and the first 2 boys duck out of sight, leaving the third boy in the doorway. The boy, mumbling, in the doorway. Could I see you a minute, Emily Ann? Emily Ann moving down to him. You say something to me, Louis? Behind them, the boss looks up disapprovingly. The boy, mumbling. You want to go to the movies tonight? Emily Ann. What's playing? The boy. A Woman's Face with Joan Crawford and Melvin Douglas. Emily Ann. I saw it. This apparently dashes the boy, who is on the verge of turning and taking flight. The boy. Well, I'll see you then. Emily Ann. I'm surprised at you, Louis, hanging out with James Pinkney Miller and Frank Sutton out there. You're one of the nice boys in school, from one of the better families. I mean, your daddy is a doctor. I don't know what James Pinkney Miller told you about me, but I wouldn't take anything he said to be very true. I went out with him just once, and he tried all sorts of things, but he didn't get very far. So I wouldn't believe anything he or Frank Sutton said. What did they say about me? The boy. They didn't say anything. Emily Ann. I really want to know, what did they say about me? The boy. We could drive over to Hagerstown. They got 3 movies there. There must be one there you didn't see. Emily Ann. Well, I would like to go out with you, Lewis, because you're from one of the better families, but I don't like you listening to any of those stories James Pinkney Miller might tell you. Pause. The boy is afraid to push his luck. He just waits. Emily Ann. Well, you know where I live, and you can call for me at 7 o'clock. The boy, anxious to get out of the store. All right, I'll see you. Emily Ann. You have to call for me at my house like you'd call for any girl. And you have to wear a necktie and a jacket. The boss turns from the 2 women he has been selling socks to and barks. The boss. You gonna buy something, boy, or are you gonna stand there blocking up the door? The boy. I'm going, Mr. Rice. He turns and hurries out of the shop. Main Street. The boy comes out of the Five and Dime. His 2 friends have been waiting a few storefronts down. The 3 boys congregate in a little group for a moment. The boy, Lewis, is nodding his head to let them know he's made the date. The 3 boys start down the street, giggling to each other over some private little lechery of their own. Emily's house. Landing outside the door. Emily Ann stands on the upper landing of the 2-story house, looking down to the street, waiting for her date to show up. It is dusk, near night, and the lightning bugs flit about. She wears an inexpensive organdy dress, and despite the rather gauche upswept hairdo, she looks extremely pretty. Behind her, sitting on rockers, are her mother and Aunt Alice Marie. Her mother is now a thin, aesthetic-looking religionist. She wears steel-rimmed glasses, and her face is drawn into intense sobriety. The 2 older women are singing with quiet sternness. I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses. Emily Ann's POV. Looking down to the street as a 1942 Oldsmobile sedan pulls up to the house. Emily Ann starts for the stairs. Emily Ann. I'll do the dishes when I get home. The 2 women singing. And the words I hear falling on my ear, the voice of God discloses. The 2 women watch from the balcony as Emily Ann reaches the bottom of the stairs and hurries down the path to the waiting sedan at the curb. The 2 women off-screen. And he walks with me, and he talks with me. Emily Ann gets quickly into the sedan, closes the door after her, and the car moves off. Inside the sedan, moving down the road, night. Emily Ann and the boy, now dressed in blue suit and tie, drive along through the night. Through the windows of the sedan, we see the quiet lights of the town's residential district for a while, fading eventually into the black silence of the open road to Hagerstown. For a moment, they ride in silence. The boy is getting nervous, concentrating on his driving, and Emily Ann composed, even thoughtful. Emily Ann. I sewed this. I'm wearing myself, you know. The boy. Is that a fact? Emily Ann. Oh, I sew most of my clothes. I'm very good at that. I sewed the dress I wore in the show last month when the Dramatic Club, we did Stage Door by George Kaufman and Edna Ferber. Was you there? It was a triumph. Everybody said that was the best show the Dramatic Club has ever done. Everybody said it was just wonderful. Thelma Doris's mother said to me she never laughed so much in her life as the way I said my lines. It was a triumph. She is quite excited now, turned in her seat toward him, her eyes glowing. That was the most wonderful evening of my life. Was you there? The boy. Sure. Emily Ann. Everybody just came over to me and was so nice. Miss Gillespie said I was the best girl she ever had in the dramatic club. Well, I was so scared. I was just saying words. I didn't know I was doing anything special. Everybody was so nice to me. I began to cry. Just all of a sudden, I began to cry, Miss Gillespie. She said, "What are you crying about?" I said, "I don't know. Everybody's so nice to me." She said, "You should be happy. Tonight was a triumph for you." Well, I just couldn't stop bawling. My mother was there. She said, "What are you crying about?" I said, "I don't know." Well, I'm going to tell you, we went home, my mother and I. I just, I didn't want to go home at all that night. I was up in the clouds. But we finally went home and my mother gave me a hug. And I began to cry all over again. My mother, as you might know, is a Seventh-day Adventist and is very pious and severe. And she didn't even want me to be in the play. And we don't do much hugging in our house. I do believe that was the first hug she gave me, and I don't remember. Since I was an infant, I believe. She's a Seventh-day Adventist, you know. She won't work on Saturday. Not even in the defense plant down there where she's working now, in the Goodrich Rubber Company. All of a sudden, in the last few years, my mother has become very religious. She was a pretty girl when she was young. My Uncle George says she was the belle of Clarksville, Tennessee. That's where I was born. That's near Fort Donelson, where Grant won the first Northern victory in the Civil War. Well, I couldn't stop crying all night long. I woke up the next morning. I no sooner opened my eyes and I began bawling again. I got tears in my eyes right now just talking about it. Isn't that the silliest thing you ever saw? She dries her eyes quickly with a finger, turns back and looks out the front windshield at the road rolling underneath the wheels. Emily Ann, that was the most wonderful night of my life. The boy smiles briefly, concentrates on his driving. A silence falls between them. Emily Ann, after a moment, I hope you don't mind my rattling on like this. I'm well aware I have the reputation of being a real earbender. The boy. Oh no, I'm always happy when the girl takes over the burden of the conversation. Emily Ann. Well, I understand I have the reputation of carrying that burden very well. She smiles quickly at the boy, and he smiles nervously back. A sudden, sweet air settles over the two kids. Emily Ann is painfully aware of the feeling. Emily Ann, suddenly smiling. I daydream sometimes about being a movie star. I guess every girl daydreams about that. I mean, I don't think I'm so terribly pretty and all that, but they have these cosmeticians in Hollywood who make the movie stars look a lot more beautiful than they are. I mean, you ought to read some of these magazines which tell you the inside stories on some of these movie stars. I mean, most of it is all cosmetics. I do believe, however, that Anne Sheridan is just beautiful. Don't you think so? Lana Turner was only 17 when they discovered her. I daydream sometimes about that. Do you daydream about that ever? The boy, horribly shy. Well, no, I don't daydream about that. A pause sits between them. Emily Ann, what do you daydream about? The boy, embarrassed to blushing. Oh, I wouldn't even tell you. Emily Ann, there's nothing wrong with daydreaming. The boy, well, I daydream about girls, I guess. I don't get along well with girls, and he is suffused with embarrassment. Emily Ann, well, I have to tell you, Louis, your fault is that you are too shy. The girls all like you. They talk about you. And the boy, they do? Emily Ann. Oh, sure. Saran Cyril had a case on you for months. You're a very attractive boy, Louis. You mustn't be so shy. If the boy weren't driving, he would close his eyes. He is so embarrassed. Emily Ann studies her fingers in her lap. Emily Ann. I didn't exactly have a case on you myself, but I was very pleased when you asked me to go out with you today. I'm well aware that your daddy is a doctor and that there are many people in this city who look upon my mother and myself as common. Well, before my daddy died, we lived in Clarksville, Tennessee, and my father had the dry cleaning store, and we were well thought of. My mother had an N come in twice a week to help her with the washing and ironing. We were one of the better families. She has been getting angry, and her expressive young eyes begin to flash. There's lots of girls here who wish they had my background. I know I don't get invited to the cotillion and the sub-deb, and you don't know how that hurt me. I cried for weeks. I could have killed Thelma Doris and her mother. Supposed to be my friend, didn't even invite me to her sweet 16 party. I begged my mother 100 times, let's move out of N-Town. But she's crazy about money. She hoards it away. I don't even know where myself. She don't want to pay more than $7 a month for that tacky little old 3 rooms we got there. What do you think I work in Rice's Five and Dime after school for? She won't give me a penny to buy new clothes. I have to buy all my own clothes. I even saved up and bought my own public school graduation dress, the material, and sewed it myself. Everybody thought it was beautiful. They thought I'd gone to Baltimore to get it. She is aware she is being very angry, and she subsides a bit. Well, I certainly have a temper, don't I? I apologize, Louis, for that outburst, but I feel these things very deeply. She sits, her turbulent thoughts still welling in her mind. I don't expect you can understand the shame and degradation that a girl feels when she isn't invited to a sweet 16 party. The boy, essentially a very decent boy. I do understand, Emily Ann. She looks quickly at him and then bows her head quickly, not to show the sudden welling of tears his simple sympathy has generated. The car buckets along into the night. Emily Ann. I ask nothing except with the simple courtesy and respect that any other girl is treated. The boy. I don't think that's asking too much, Emily. She raises her head and looks at the chubby profile of the boy driving the car. Emily Ann. You're a very sweet boy, Louis. I like you very much. The sedan speeds along. Emily Ann leans back against the seat and kind of looks out the side window at the swiftly passing black landscape. A vague, drifting smile curls her lips. She seems a very pretty and nice girl at the moment. A movie theater. Emily Ann is really enjoying the movie. She sits in the dark theater, her eyes rapt with attention and her well-formed mouth slightly open, ready to laugh. Indistinguishable words and sounds emanate from the screen, and Emily Ann's face contorts and follows each offstage movement like a little girl at a puppet show. Something on the screen produces a laugh from the audience and a fit of giggles from Emily Ann. Then she suddenly erupts into a laugh she can no longer stifle. She is having a wonderful time. Camera pans a little so that we get a better look at the boy. His interest is not with the picture. He has his arm balanced on the space between the 2 seats he and Emily Ann are occupying. And he is mustering his last shred of courage to force himself to slide his arm around the back of her chair. This decision is making him sweat. His eyes are not looking at the screen. They are covertly examining Emily Ann. Every now and then he pretends to look at the screen. He finally contrives to get his arm around the back of Emily Ann's chair, and his fingers fall vaguely on her neck and that part of her shoulder left exposed by the scalloped cut of the dress. Emily Ann doesn't even notice it, but the boy's face would indicate he had his hand in a flame. His chin trembles and his forehead is coated with sweat. He catches his breath as if he had run the 20 miles from their hometown. Emily Ann and the audience suddenly burst into laughter again. The boy just sits. The sedan, night. Emily Ann and the boy are driving home. Emily Ann is still bubbling over the show. The boy's face is set in rigid determination. Through the windows of the car, we can perhaps tell that we are on open highway, and only an occasional gas station light interrupts the black flow of the wooded areas along the road. Emily Ann, bubbling with good humor. Her real name isn't Ginger Rogers, you know. Her real name is Virginia McMath. And you know how she got started? She used to dance in the Charleston contests, and somebody saw her, and that's how she became a star. I was thinking of taking dancing lessons, tap dancing, and things like that. But they don't even have any place there in Hagerstown where they teach that. Do you know of any? Lana Turner was discovered in a drugstore. And there was one star, I think it was Priscilla Lane or Carol Landis. It was just an old secretary, and she was riding up in the elevator, and this producer saw her, and that's how she got her start. But I was talking about Ginger Rogers. I mean, she ain't like some of them stars. She don't go out to nightclubs much. Although there was one time there everybody thought she was going to marry Howard Hughes. It was in all the magazines. Anyway, she lives in a lovely home in Beverly Hills with her mother. She keeps her mother right there with her. I think that's nice. Ginger Rogers' dressing room has mirrors on the ceiling and the walls. And she has fruitwood furniture. And she loves classical music, you know? She's very close with Deems Taylor. He's a well-known classical musician. She has his picture on her wall, but there's no romance there in the wind, I don't think. Just good friends. She has suddenly become aware that the boy is turning the car into a side road. Where are we going, Louis? The boy says nothing, afraid actually to trust his voice. The road they are on now is not too well paved, and the sedan jostles and bumps. She abruptly and shrilly knows what the boy is up to, and it stings her sharply. The bubbling enthusiasm flips off her face to be replaced by an eye-narrowed coldness. Emily Ann. I think, Louis, you ought to just turn this car around and take me home. The boy's only answer is to pull over to the side of the road, foliage and fallen branches crackling under the wheels. Emily Ann. Them James Pinkney Miller and all the other boys may have told you are not true. The car is stopped now, but the boy just sits staring at the steering wheel, mustering his courage again. A short, stout boy, brow beaded with sweat. For a moment they are both almost on the verge of tears, sitting stiffly, rigidly, a silence sick and tense between them. Then abruptly the boy reaches for her, twisting his stout torso past the steering wheel, clumsily trying to get both arms around her, frantically trying to put his face next to hers. Emily Ann fends him off easily. Emily Ann. Leave me alone! The boy, utterly shattered, twists back behind the steering wheel. It is all he can do to keep from crying. Emily Ann sits in numb fury. The boy, sick with shame and guilt. You do it for all the other boys. What's the matter with me? Emily, head down. I'd just as soon be dead. I know what everybody thinks of me. All the boys whispering about me when I walk into school. I'm afraid not to let them, that's all. I wouldn't get no dates at all if I didn't let them. Please take me home, Louis. I just assumed we did, and that's the truth. The boy is actually deeply touched, but he doesn't know what to say. He starts the motor and shifts into first gear. The sedan pulls across the road, backing up in order to reverse direction and head back the way it came. Street, outside Emily's house, night. The sedan comes down the street, wheeling to a halt in front of Emily Ann's house. It is around midnight, and the street is dark except for one lone light in some distant house. The shabby little homes are outlined vaguely against the murky sky. Inside the sedan, Emily Ann and the boy just sit. He before the steering wheel, she against the door on her side. They have nothing to say, but seem to feel something should be said. Emily Ann is too hurt to conceal the deep pain of her life from showing on her pretty young, over-rouged face. Emily Ann, mumbling, I would love to see you again, Louis. I don't suppose you would care to. The boy says nothing, only because he wouldn't know how to say it. He just wants to go home and forget all about everything. Somehow, Emily Ann is aware that the boy is perhaps as deeply shattered as she is. She darts a quick look at his tense face. Emily Ann. Utter desolation. Oh, I don't care. If you still want to, it's all right with me. The boy looks at her, not quite sure he knows what she means. She slides over to him, spiritlessly puts her arms around his neck and kisses him in a gesture of ultimate futility. The boy cannot adjust to this for a moment, but then he seizes her almost desperately and begins kissing her on the neck. Close-up of Emily Ann looking over the boy's shoulder. Her eyes are wide, and there are tears in them. She seems absolutely unaware of the fact that she is being made love to. Emily Ann almost calmly. I'm going to go to Hollywood someday, and I'm going to be a star. I'm going to be a star. Street outside Emily's house night. Medium shot of the closed, dark sedan. Through the front side window, we catch a vague glimpse of the two lost young kids clutched in each other's embrace. A little movement of the white of his shirt, of the light pastel of her dress. Camera pans away from the car across the unpaved sidewalk along the wall of Emily Ann's building to the upper landing. Close shot of the mother, still sitting on her rocker on the balcony in her faded print dress. The aunt has gone. The mother sits alone, singing almost inaudibly to herself. And he walks with me, and he talks with me. Fade out. Main Street, 1944, night. Several shots looking down on Main Street again, but a marked change. We have faded in with a sharp blare of military music which indicates what has happened to the small city of Butler, Maryland. It is an army town now. From where we sit, the sidewalks look jammed with GIs, meandering, lounging, clogged doorways looking into shop windows. They are lined up outside the movie house. There is a lot of weekend pass high spirits. Underneath this, the martial music drums and fifes up a storm. Street off Main Street, night. From the corner we look down the street that joins Main Street at right angles. It is essentially a quiet street with a little cluster of stores where it joins Main Street. The stores are closed now and the street is dark. Way down on Main Street, we can still see a few lights. It is drizzling. A tall young GI is sprawled on the curb. His eyes are closed, but an occasional movement shows he is alive. His face and his uniform are drenched with rain and smeared with mud, and the drizzle beats lightly down on his face. A group of 4 people come hurrying around the corner from Main Street. They are 2 GIs and 2 girls. The GIs have their jacket collars up, and the 2 girls have found impromptu protection against the rain, a newspaper or magazine. They are walking quickly, a giggly, laughing, whispery little group. We may possibly recognize Emily Ann as one of the girls. She is now 18, full, sensual, wearing a light fall topcoat and high-heeled wedgies. The 4 young people approach the body of the drunken GI sprawled on the street in the foreground. The boy with Emily Ann has his arm around her. The first GI becomes aware of something in the street. A few steps later, he recognizes the form to be a GI. He slows his walk as he approaches. First GI. Hey, look at that. The others are also aware of the body in the street now. The girl with Emily Ann is frightened and hangs back, but Emily Ann is fascinated. She edges forward with the 2 GIs who are now coming to make a closer examination of the body. First GI. Boy, he's loaded, huh? Second GI. Maybe he's dead. The body on the street moves slightly now, relieving everybody of this possibility. Behind the 2 GIs, we can see Emily Ann a few steps back, watching, fascinated, and the other girl even farther back. The 2 GIs stand regarding the form, a little at a loss for what to do. First GI. We ought to get him somewhere. He'll get pneumonia. Second GI. Yeah. He squats down beside the body, lifts the head. Second GI to the head. Hey, Mac. First GI, squatting down, impressed. You know who that is? That's Tower E Company, John Tower. To Emily Ann. You know who this is? This is John Tower, the son of the movie star. Oh, what a lunatic this guy is. Emily Ann is quite impressed. She stares at the thin, gaunt, wet face. Young Tower is being helped to his feet with great difficulty by the second GI. Second GI to the first GI. Give me a hand with this, will ya? The girl in background. Is he all right? Emily Ann, turning to the girl 10 steps or so back. Lucy, that's John Tower, the son of the movie star. The girl. Is he dead? The movie star's son hangs limply between the 2 GIs. We see a tall, thin boy of 25. Water streaks down the gaunt face. His eyes are closed. He is out cold. The first GI has been digging into Towers' pocket. First GI. He's got a hotel key here. Emily Ann. Lucy, that's the son of John Tower, the movie star. The hotel room night. Through the open doorway come the 2 GIs holding young Tower. Emily Ann follows. The other girl can possibly be seen in the corridor outside. The room is dark, and the only light for a moment is a diffused shaft pouring weakly in from the hallway. Everybody is in silhouette for a moment. Then somebody turns on the light, and the room is filled with a vague, fitful sort of light coming from a naked and inadequate bulb hanging overhead. The second GI has managed to get Tower over to the bed, where he lets him down. Tower slides back onto the bed, his feet dangling over the side. He is awake, but almost comatose. He is mumbling, "Get out of here," over and over again, so that the words are indistinguishable and the effect is gibberish. His face and hair are matted with the filth of the street he was lying in, and the front of his uniform is drenched through in ugly wet splotches. Black rivulets run off onto the wildly rumpled white sheets. The bed is in great. It is an old-fashioned brass bed. The room itself is the inevitably dreary room of all small hotels, with faded wallpaper, a stained wash basin in the corner, the towel is lying in a heap on the floor, a cheap mahogany chest of drawers topped by a cracked mirror, and a worn soft chair with a hole in its slipcover. The first GI is standing by the wall switch. It was he who turned on the light. Emily Ann stands framed in the open doorway, watching the proceedings with wide-eyed fascination. She has never seen anybody so drunk, and the son of a well-known movie star at that. The second GI lifts Tower's feet onto the bed with no apparent concern for the fact that the sopping wet GI's shoes are smearing the disarrayed spread. 3 empty fifths of whiskey and a half-empty gallon jug of wine are on the floor in various locations. First GI. What are we going to do with him? Because it's almost 12 o'clock. We got to get to the bus, boy. Why don't we tell the desk clerk to send up a doctor or something? Turning to Emily Ann. Listen, honey, I'm sorry, but we got to make the bus, so you girls will have to get home alone. Emily Ann. Now, don't worry about me, honey. Second GI, to the other girl now in the doorway. You girls can get home alone, can't you? Emily Ann. Oh, you boys go run and get your bus. I'll take care of this boy. The second GI has already gone out into the corridor. The first GI follows him. First GI. I'll call you during the week, honey. Emily Ann. That's fine, honey. He exits. Emily Ann goes to the doorway. Emily Ann. To Lucy, who has moved off. Lucy, I'll stay here a couple of minutes. Take care of this boy. Take off his shoes, you know. You go on home, honey. On the bed, young Tower lies limp and unmoving, his eyes open and staring without seeing up to the ceiling above him. Emily Ann closes the door and turns to him. She regards him for a moment, then moves quickly across the room to where the towel is lying on the floor, picks it up, and comes back to the bed where he is lying. Tower, mumbling. Get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. She regards him for a moment, then bends down and begins drying his hair and face. The hotel room, the following dawn. Dissolved to a wide shot of the room, showing Emily Ann sitting in the soft chair uncomfortably asleep, and young Tower on the bed sleeping fitfully. The sheets are twisted around him, and his thin arms and shoulders make sudden, involuntary twists and jerks. He is wearing only a t-shirt and the trousers now. The window by the bed shows a gray-black dawn hanging sullenly over the roofs of the town. The slight, persistent drizzle continues. With a sudden start, he is awake. He sits bolt upright as if he has been startled awake by a nightmare. Close-up of young Tower, his face and body rigid, eyes wide. Then the terror goes, and he remains haggard, disheveled, and soddenly drunk. He slides off the bed with some creaking of the mattress, and Emily Ann opens her eyes. He crosses the room to the chest of drawers, hardly aware of Emily Ann's presence, takes one of the fifths of whiskey sitting on the chest of drawers, looks around for a glass, sees it on the floor by the bed, gets it, pours himself a half tumbler full, sits down on the bed again, sipping his drink and examining his naked toes. Emily Ann watches him, wary, her face worn and exhausted. He notes her briefly. The silence unnerves Emily Ann. Emily Ann. You was laying out in the street there on Jackson Street in the rain and all, so we brought you up here. He doesn't seem to have heard her. Emily Ann. Are you really the son of John Tower? She would prattle on, but in one quick gesture, young Tower has sent the bottle of whiskey he is holding crashing against the wall, the jagged pieces of glass spraying around, the liquor draining down the wall in small streams. Emily Ann sits petrified. Young Tower studies his glass of whiskey. Tower, his speech heavy and thick. I can't even give myself a floozy without using my old man for a reference. He stands unsteadily and moves aimlessly around the room in his bare feet, muttering indistinguishable imprecations, his face swollen and hostile. I had plenty of women. I don't need my father. When I was 17, I used to steal his women. He turns abruptly, goes back to the bed, sits down. After a moment, he mutters quietly, You can infer, if you wish, that I don't particularly care for my father. Emily Ann stands a little uncertainly. Emily Ann mumbling, As long as you're all right. Tower, what did you say? Emily Ann louder. I said, I just wanted to make sure you was all right. So long as you're all right, I guess I'll be going. Tower, standing again disjointedly, looks around the room for his jacket. Don't leave me now. I won't do anything terrible except possibly commit suicide. That's what I came up here for, you know. Drown myself in the bathtub. Go look in there. The bath is full. I got blind as a coot last night and staggered in stark naked and fell in the tub and put my head under the water. And I almost did it. I can't describe to you the absolute tranquility. But way back in the empty hollow, some persistent hammer of life clunked away. And at the last minute, I pulled my head up and gasped in the air, and I lay on the dirty, cold, wet tiles, twitching like a fish in the bottom of a boat. I just don't have the talent for suicide. I took 17 sleeping pills in the Ashford Hotel in New York, but they rushed up the stairs with a stomach pump, and I spent the night in Bellevue. I tried gas, but all I got was color in my cheeks. I just don't have the knack. Suddenly leans to her. What are you living for? Be honest now. Tell me. What's it going to add up to, this 60, 70 years you're going to flounder around this earth? One day you'll be necking in the back of the car with one of the boys from town. And because all your friends are getting married, you'll get married. You'll put on weight, and your husband will take up with a waitress in a hotel in Chattanooga. You'll have babies, and to visit your in-laws in the evening, and your husband will get sick, and you'll fret about the rent. Your hair will gray, and you'll suddenly look back and say, What happened? It's all over. Your friends will die, and you'll sink into melancholic hours, sitting by a window, peering with unseeing eyes through white chintz curtains, and finally they'll drop your long wooden box into the moldering grave. And what was it all about except worry and tears? Am I lying? Isn't that it? Slings and arrows. A tale told by an idiot. Why bother? It all ends up in the grave. You might as well make an honest effort to get there. He turns away from her and lurches back to the bed. He sits down heavily, stares with swollen, sullen red eyes at the tumbler of whiskey in his hand. Tower. What would you know about it anyway? A frump in a hick town. You don't know what loneliness is. You think it's not having a date on Saturday night. You don't know the great ultimate ache of desolation. I'm cold. Close the window or something. He lies back on the bed now, staring up at the ceiling through wide, drunken, tear-filled eyes, crying quietly and without constraint now. Tower. The last time I saw my father was 6 years ago. He was sitting in the living room of that barn he has in Sherman Oaks, playing solitaire, guzzling wine because he's too miser cheap to buy a decent fifth of Irish whiskey, half hidden behind a thin blanket of cigarette smoke. The house was empty. My mother had a nervous breakdown when I was 11. My older brother, Tom, my old man, drove him years ago into an insane asylum, where he walks around picking up imaginary strings off the floor. My father said, "Where have you been the last couple of weeks?" Last couple of weeks? I've been gone for a year and a half in the Spanish Civil War. I said, "Pa, I need psychiatric help. I'm lost. I have to fight sometimes to keep myself from jumping out of windows. I'm asking you to be kind to me." He said, "I'm supporting one crazy son, and that's enough for me." That's my old man, star of stage, screen, and radio, and a host of favorites. He lies on the bed, quietly, unmoving, his eyes open. Tower, after a moment. You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand. You don't know what loneliness means. All you ever cried at was a Street and Smith love story. Camera pans slowly to Emily Ann sitting hunched over on the soft chair. Tears make wet little paths down her cheeks. She has been quietly crying for some time. Dissolved to some time later, across the bed, still a tempest of sheets and spread and blankets. The sun is high in the sky now. It's a very hot noon. On the bed, a fully dressed Emily Ann and young Tower, dressed as in the previous scene, lie clutched in embrace. Emily Ann is sleeping in the young man's arms. He is awake, looking down at the full, soft young face with ineffable tenderness. The sun streams in through the window, almost whitening their faces and bleaching away the abject tawdriness of the room. A hilly landscape day. Long shot looking across the pretty countryside of Maryland with its clumps of trees and high grassy slopes, almost Renoir-esque in warm pastel charm. The sun is high and strong. Way off in the distance, but visible, a soldier and a girl are seated by a picnic basket. Closer long shot, looking through thickets and bushes, the sun glinting and quivering through the leaves. We can see Emily Ann and young Tower clearly enough, but they are too far away to be overheard too well. They are romping. Warm, sensual, tickling, laughing, muffled, intimate enjoyment. Young Tower stands, and we can hear Emily Ann's laughter. Through the bracken and bramble, we see Emily Ann on her haunches, gathering the wax paper and other remnants of the picnic into a pile so she can set it afire. She is laughing as she goes about this. Tower is standing, his shirt collar open, his tie dangling loosely as he expostulates. Tower. I am. I'm tongue-tied, inarticulate. Silent to the point of brooding. What are you laughing at? It's true. He laughs. Emily Ann bursts into laughter. Tower can't resist smiling himself. Come on! Her laughter is too infectious. He finds himself laughing with her. Emily Ann. John, you haven't stopped talking since I met you. Tower has stopped laughing and is regarding her with a quick, sudden warmth. Tower. When I was 12 years old, I was in Andover prep school. Very fancy. My father sent me to one fancy boarding school after another. I got thrown out of all of them. But when I was in Andover, I knew a boy. We shared a room together. A blonde boy named Elliot Sherman, and we used to sit up all night long talking about everything. He was the only boy I ever met who had read as much as I had. You can't imagine what I had read by the time I was 12. My father had thousands and thousands of books. He bought this huge shack out in Sherman Oaks, California, and the library came with it. He never read a one of them. I read them all. Lucretius and Sophocles, all the great desolate dramas of antiquity. I wore out Shakespeare and Macaulay and Gibbon, the fat sprawling histories of the Victorians, obscure poetry of B.V. Thompson, and the elegant jaded sensuality of pre-Raphaelites. I used to lie all alone in the bleak shadowed living room and read until my head fell on the books. Mark Twain. I adored him. That's all I own now are a few slim volumes of Mark Twain's black little pessimism, Pudd'nhead Wilson's notebook, What is Man? And a collection of Eugene O'Neill, that great Irish peddler of death. I was 12 years old, mind you, and I used to stand in that empty living room quoting the sonorous despair of Edwin Arlington Robinson and the biting contempt of Jeffers. My father was out chasing some tart, and my 16-year-old brother was out wandering the streets half demented. What a family, huh? Well, anyway, there was this boy in Andover when I was 12 years old, and we used to talk all night long. And to this day, you're the only other person I've ever talked like that with. Emily Ann, squatting by the little pile of refuse, looks up at him standing beside her, and he looks down at her, both tenuously aware that this is somehow a declaration of love. After a moment, he sits, staring at the ground, and then sprawls on his side. She lights a match and sets the little pile of papers in front of her ablaze. She sits in front of the small fire and studies her hands, nervously twitching in her lap. Emily Ann, quietly. I love you so much, John. I can't tell you how much I love you. If the army ever stations you somewhere else, I think I'll die. I'll follow you. I swear I will. I wish we was married. I'll make you a good wife. I swear I will. You'll never be sorry. Never. Tower rolls over on his back away from her. Emily props herself up on an elbow. Emily Ann. I'll follow you. I mean it. I will. I wish we was married, John. I'd make you a good wife. I'll make you a good home. You'll never regret it. Never. Tower sits up now, his back almost to her. His eyes cloud and his features assume a rigid blandness. Emily Ann is keenly and miserably aware of the change. Emily Ann. You don't care about me at all, do you? Tower. That's not true. Emily Ann. I'm just somebody to spend the weekend with because you can have your way with her. Tower. That's not true. Emily Ann. You keep me waiting in front of that hotel every week. An hour and a half. I never know if you're going to come. GIs come by, making cracks at me until I think I'll burst. Why do I do it? Who's he? He don't even care about me. I cry myself to sleep every night thinking about you. I think about how you've been hurt all your life, and I want to take care of you and give you a good home. And I'm just some girl for lack of any other to you. Tower, avoiding her eyes. That's not true, Emmy. You're the only person I have in my life. You're very dear to me. What do you think? I'm a big lover. I go around scraping women off my sleeves. You're the first girl I've talked to in months. I lie in my barracks so lonely I can hardly keep from getting up and running across the street to the rec hall to call you on the phone. She stares at him, her eyes suddenly welling with tears. Emily Ann. Oh, Johnny, I wish you had. I wish you had. Tower. I destroy everything that means anything to me. I always have. Emily Ann, furiously in love. That's not true. I've never been so happy in all my life from what you just told me. Tower. I'm too damaged for you, Emily. Emily Ann. I want to hold you in my arms, John. Tower. Emmy, what are we kidding ourselves? I love you now. In half an hour, I'll wonder how I ever got into this. You have a passion for respectability, and I have a horror of loneliness. That's love. See? I've destroyed it already. A sweet feeling poked its head up out of my morose solitude, and I stomped it out fast. I always do. The worst thing that could happen to us is if we get married. I'd hate you before the blush of the ceremony had gone from your cheeks. Emily Ann. I'll make you a good wife, Johnny. I'll make you a good home. Tower. I love you, Emmy. They kneel, regarding each other with deep sweetness.